how excited are you finally, after months of relentless work, to finally see the facility be operational?
So how am I excited? Wow. I feel like this has kind of been in the works since even just the start of my career, and it's just really building the confidence in me to get to this point. And really the journey has been just collecting information and how I would do it differently while I was building other people's vision and then now learning how what I think is what I would want for the kids that we serve. So, but just the last couple of months, it's been stressful because I just want it to be done right. And so when you want things done right, whether it's clinical or just the physical space, there are worries, just like any parents have worries. And so the worry is, is this what the kids want? Is this what the parents want? And because it's mine now, so it's just, is this what I want for everyone who comes through here? But I'm just beyond excited.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
What has been the biggest challenge for you as far as getting to this point and up and running?
The biggest challenge, I feel like this challenge isn't unique to me. It's the journey that everyone has been in the world for the last couple of years with COVID being the biggest barrier as far as just getting basic like building supplies and certain things to get it up to where we need it to be and passing all the permits, but definitely not unique to me. I think it's more so like internally in my head is like, is everything working out and is it happening at the right time?
So let's take a step back. What is ABA? What first led you to get into applied behavior analysis, which ultimately brought you to this point today?
Yeah, what got me into ABA? Well, I knew nothing about ABA before in the early 2000s. My vision was to go to medical school and serve children as a physician, specifically in pediatric care. I had an advisor at my university who said, hey, you really should intern at this ABA center. And I was like, what is ABA, right? I mean, just like every parent probably today that I often see, what is ABA? And so I interned at the center and I was like, I think I know what this is. But then when I really saw the basic foundations of things that kids and people like, which is reinforcement, right? Being able to access the types of reinforcement that encourages you to engage in these behaviors that really grows you. Every person, it's nice when someone compliments me on my outfit and hair, and it makes you want to do more of that. So when I saw that there's something, such a basic principle that could change a person's life, I was like, sign me up. And the journey is probably less scary than medical school. At least for me then.
That's amazing. Well, I see you brought a very special guest. Can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Marla Root. I am a parent of a 25-year-old son with autism, and I do a lot of work, helping families advocate for services and get access to insurance-funded treatments. And I try to support providers. So, we're really excited to see more and more providers in Ohio opening centers, and some of these centers being in families' backyards, and the idea that they don't have to travel, but they can get access to really good care, and that's just so important, and which is what we like, the idea of seeing that capacity build.
You have a 24 or 25-year-old son with autism, so who can access this type of program? ABA, I should say. Who can access ABA?
Well, ABA is applied behavior analysis, right? It's a science of behavior. So we want anybody to be able to access it at any age based on their needs, right? And for my son, it was ABA was definitely probably saved my family, probably saved my marriage, and at one point probably saved my life, that I had access to good clinicians, and the idea that my son kind of ebbs and flows, right? He's been doing so well the last couple of years. He has his own place and he has roommates, and they have care around the clock. They still need care, but it's the idea that, if he would get into a situation where maybe he just seems agitated or anxiety is high or what have you, we really rely on these clinicians to come in and help us find out what's happening, what can we do, and how can we support him. So, the goal would be that just like any, if I had diabetes or, I had anxiety, that I access treatment when I need to access treatment. So we would hope that, ABA would be available for that.
As a parent, when did you first start to see signs or identify with your son that maybe you had to look at a treatment like ABA?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was very young because I'd had a daughter just 11 months older who really spoke early and, was talking in complete sentences by 18 months. And so we felt like he was behind. We felt that he was not playing with toys appropriately. And, he wasn't really engaging in like relationship building with us and so forth. He loved us and he was with us and he was just fantastic. But you could just tell that he wasn't learning, picking up some of those general things that our daughter did. And so that's when we thought, something seems to be amiss here. And, he would take trucks and turn them over and spin the wheels and he could do that forever. So that's kind of when we said, something just doesn't seem like, normal child development, right? And so that's when we were like, researching and that's when families can really rely on their physicians, their psychologists, when you go get a clinical diagnostic, other parents for sure, and really, reach out and listen to and see what's happening out there and making choices that work well for you and your family.
Wow. So what does a day in the life of an autism patient and a parent of someone with autism look like?
Well, it's wonderful. It's wonderful being parents. The people with autism are just amazing people with amazing skills. And then, but sometimes there's challenges too. Sometimes your family changes the way your family runs on a daily basis, right? You want to be able to support your loved one in any way you can. And you want to support the health of your family, right? And so depending on, in autism, it's a spectrum, right? So you have more individuals who are more impacted, some individuals who are less. My son is severely impacted and has a severe intellectual disability. So, I think your family, hopefully your family has a good support team and people that help you make good decisions. You you try these treatments, right? And that you embrace that into your home. And then once you really, work with a behavior analyst and bring some of these strategies that you learn into your home, and then everybody in the family is using them, it really helps, cohese, bring the family together and it really supports that person. I mean, that's the goal. I mean, we're trying to support them the best we can. And, applied behavior analysis is proven science and has really helped many, many, many families. So, but that's a part of that journey with your clinicians and determining what type of therapy works for my child, because it is a spectrum. They're all different.
It is, and I think you bring up a good point, is that your experience could be very different from another family's experience, and then also my clinical judgment is very varied, right? It's because because it's a spectrum, so some kids may only need perhaps 10 hours of treatment a week, and some kids may need 30 to 40 hours of treatment a week. So what does that look like, right? So and that's where it's individualized. It's like based on their needs and what is presented to us, what direction we want to bring them. And also parents are part of that communication and treatment is what is valuable to you as a family to make sure that your child's a part of the family. So if it's a special event that happens maybe once a year and they've had trouble before, but that's such a significant event for the grandparents or the parents, we could take this information and we work on how to make that experience exciting for the kids. We don't want kids to engage in an activity or an event that they don't want to. Maybe when they're 18 and they're like, I don't want to come home and have dinner. I want to hang out with my friend. That's great. We want to get the kids to that point, right, to be able to say that. But how do we make these experiences that were really difficult because they're impacted by autism, that they can be a part of the community and part of a family's life and be able to do basic things that kids should do and want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So is that one of the elements that you would say makes your facility unique? What is that differentiator, perhaps, that you guys offer?
Yeah, well, for one, I think having my own private practice allows families to have access to me directly. So as the practice grows and we have more board-certified behavior analysts and more technicians, part of me having my own practice is kind of keeping myself grounded again, putting myself back on and interacting with the families. And again, applied behavior analysis is individualized for the child and for their needs, but that means it's also the family's needs as well, that they can grow with the family. And for me, it's just, I tell families all the time, I'm like, so when you come and be a part of Wolff Pack here, just know that you kind of inheriting me as well. Because we do work intensely. We'll communicate as much as you want, and we will keep you as involved as you want. And some parents are like, usually after a couple weeks, they're like, you've got this, Kim. I'm like, thank you. So it's really nice that I have always developed trust with families, and so that allows me to really continue to bring out the best in the kids.
So you're a very forward-thinking individual. I think that's safe to say. And with that, I'm curious, what is your vision, both short-term and long-term, for the facility?
Right. Well, if I could do everything, I would. So yes, so my vision has to be systematic, is what I've learned over time. I get excited about wanting to do everything and absolutely anything for the kids that I've always served. Currently at Wolff and Phan Autism Center, we're serving the pediatric, so for kids as young as 2, well into the teen years. But it also depends, again, autism is on a spectrum, and we also need to look at, do all the kids mesh well, right? So we want to make sure that is we're being mindful and thoughtful about that as well, is that kids who come to the center, again, I want it to be where kids can learn from each other as well. So it has to fit the Wolff Pack culture, so every child can thrive every day. And there will be difficult days, but we want to support those kids in those difficult days, but we want to make sure that every child is safe in their own space, and happy. And so hopefully down the line, if everything continues to do well, that I have my practice will grow with the kids that we have. So whether it's a vocational programming or some other type of programming, I've worked with individuals of all ages as a behavior analyst, and so I definitely have that experience. I know what it looks like at the age of 70, and I also know what it looks like the age of recently diagnosed, a 2-year-old or a late diagnosis. So I do have a significant background as far as age, but also beyond autism diagnosis. So I see how applied behavior analysis can really work across all diagnoses, other diagnoses as well. So I have a lot of big dreams. I just now have to focus on this and really serve the current kids and families, and before I can kind of continue to expand on beyond what I can work with right now.
So I've read that ABA is starting to actually be applied more frequently in traditional classroom settings. I'm curious, is that a trend that you're seeing? And if so, what impact will that have?
Yeah. So what I've had the privilege to do the last couple of years is have been asked to consult to schools. I find that schools I love it. I love it when other places invite me to come in and consult. And not just schools, there's been also other places that I've been asked to come in. And so certainly applied behavior analysis isn't just for kids with autism. And it is, that is currently the big buzz. But I love that teachers and other places such as schools are now looking to, oh wow, what is this, we can motivate kids individually and really look at them as an individual student, which I find is great, right? I mean, I would say, I don't know, what tradition are we talking about? Is it like 1920s classroom? So it's exciting. It's exciting that people are recognizing ABA isn't just one lane, and that it really enhances the lives of all parties involved.
So this is a question for both of you. Do parents participate in ABA as part of your program?
Yes, they will, because the point of treatment, right, and what's happening when you're getting ABA therapy is that parents are learning. So us parents need to learn these strategies, right? So we can, we're with our kids so much, and so like from my son, when he got into the teenage years, he had a lot more agitation. He was less settled. Anxiety was up. So we really had to learn about, what are some of these de-escalation strategies we can do, and then and then how do we implement those de-escalation strategies at the early signs of agitation and so forth. So you're supporting them, and so once you have some tools, like I call it tools in your tool belt, that you can really say, oh look, you're having a rough day, let's just sit down for a minute, and you like to listen to music, or let's do deep breathing, or let's something, and that way you're learning to interact, right? And what's great about that is my son with autism learned those techniques in a safe environment with the behavior analyst first. So they tested it, they came up with, these are the strategies we feel that works with them, and then they train you. That way you can implement them. So if you're at grandma's house and maybe there's tons of people in the room and they're getting overwhelmed, these are strategies you can say, hey, listen, we don't have to leave. We can work through this so we can stay for cake. Cake's coming down the road or something. And so, and then think about how then hopefully right, our loved ones with autism will learn how to self-regulate themselves. So, so if they're, I don't know, working at McDonald's as a teenager and they're feeling overwhelmed, they can use those techniques themselves to recenter themselves, relax, and then move on. And so, so it's wonderful when the families understand. And in our family, when our son was during this time of agitation and high anxiety, sometimes we were doing things that actually escalated him, and we didn't realize what we were doing was, we were parents, so we didn't know. And so once you learn some of these skills, and it's just amazing. And then then you hear a lot of husbands and wives say they use it on each other sometimes. But yeah, so it is important. And because think about this, if my loved one is at Kim's center during the day and he does extremely well, but when he comes home, I'm not supporting him in some of those same manners, that's very confusing to a young child. So the more the parents can be involved and understand, and and then it's more of a holistic approach.
And I think that's the hard part. Well, a couple of things I always let parents know is that they already have these tools. It's just having someone to reinforce them that they have these tools, and but also making sure that when we're utilizing these tools under stressful conditions, as a parent, anytime a kid cries, that is stressful. Any kid who cries, whether it's your kid or not, it stresses you because you have the parent instinct. But you already have these tools, and perhaps that when you hear a child cry and get upset, you naturally just want to stop it. And sometimes trying just to de-escalate and stop it, you could potentially be maintaining the behavior and reinforcing the behavior. So having a professional come in and kind of really affirm what you're doing, and also redirect you and to reshift of like, okay, remember, this is our terminal goal.
Yeah, right.
Is to not continue to experience this. So parents already have the tools. It's coaching. There's a lot of books out there on how to be parents. But I mean, how do I read a 300-page book and be the parent? It's something that
That's hard.
It's hard,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's when you're stressed out and have someone telling you what to do and when to stop and when to walk away. It's helpful, and I, like you said, like sometimes you kind of wish we do it on our spouses.
Right. Yeah.
So despite ABA being evidence-based, or in other words, scientifically verified, which I know you mentioned, by the U.S. Surgeon General, among others, do you still see any stigmas associated with this treatment or autism in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I like about having clinics available for families is the idea that, so if my son is doing something, right, that's maybe a different behavior than his peers, and especially if your son is aware that that's happening, being able to go into a clinic environment and work on, whatever that challenge is in a safe environment, his peers aren't staring at him, so I mean, there's stigma and all kinds of stuff, but the idea that, what's best for them and how do we support them, right? And the idea that, of course, applied behavior analysis, as Kim's going to talk about, it is a young industry, right? And a young treatment that's still continuing to its path forward and its journey.
Yeah, it's quite a journey. So I want to say over a decade ago, in the early 2000s, when I really first got into the industry, it was about 1 in every 124 kids getting diagnosed. And even then, I remember when I first entered into the industry, I was like, wow, that's significant, right? But today, it's one in every 50, 52, around that range. And so it's changed. Again, it's shocking me even more. Now, people can say it's because there's more clinicians out there diagnosing. There's all these, we're more accepting of it. But at the end of the day, when that diagnosis is out there, that means there's got to be enough clinicians. There's got to be enough providers to meet the demand so that these kids get what they should access, right? And they're entitled to access as care. So the field, again, has only been around for about a little over 20 years. So there's a lot of growth that needs to be done, just like any industry, any type of medicine. And so for myself specifically, sometimes, I'm considered as a dinosaur in this industry. I'm not exactly holding a cane walking across the road, but because the field is so young and I've been in it for over 15 years, and about 80% of board certified behavior analysts are less than 5 years experience, right? So really, for us, it's for us old dinosaur is supporting the young board certified and making sure that they are being guided, just like any medical facility where you always have a senior surgeon or senior physician who's overlooking the one who was just recently board certified. And so that's also part of the other vision that I have for Wolff and Phan Autism Center is continuing to provide fellowship for our future board certified behavior analyst and really try to help meet the demand that's really needed up there within our community in Northeast Ohio.
So do you still run into parents who perhaps are in denial that their child may be suffering from autism? And if so, how do you manage to get them to understand it and actually buy it?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that's I'm also a parent of 3 kids. And so I think anytime your kid isn't feeling well or doing well, so it's something as slight as a flu or a cold, there's always that sense of, you're scared, especially when the doctor's like, oh, now we're referring you to a specialist. And so then you're like, oh, so you think of the worst and you go to the wrong websites online and you get the wrong information. And perhaps in between the wrong, you hear the right information, right? So I empathize with that. It is hard. And I think what's hard for me is parents will only come and see me. The process of the medical process is that you go and you get diagnosed. You're handed this report, and this report says ABA therapy is kind of like your next stop. That's when I see them is the next stop after they've been handed a 20-page something report. I'm sure you recall that. But you're kind of like, oh my God, what do I do? Now I have to call like 6,000 different places and get my kid on a list. Again, that goes for any parent, for any type of anything that has to do with your child, and you just want them to be okay. And I think what makes it different as far as my services, I mean, this is the same process for every family, is that I can, I'm pretty forward. Here's where you're at, and let me take this on now, and then let me, walk you through the process. I think it is confusing, and so I've definitely have had parents call, and whether they come into my practice or not, or they decide a different journey, is that I'm very forward with the process and what to expect.
So, a few misconceptions, in my opinion, about autism that hopefully we can clarify. Is it true that autism symptoms can go away with time over age?
So let's first talk about typical kids, right? So like when you're referring to symptoms is behaviors, right? Things that you can see that's observable. That's a lot of what behavior analysts work with. Like, what do I see and how can I improve the behavior, or if it's a behavior that's completely impactful, how do I decrease that behavior? So let's take a typical child, for example, right? It's just kids engaging kid behaviors, and sometimes they're great and sometimes they make a parent just want to scream, and perhaps sometimes both parents don't get along on their perspective. So there's that. So with applied behavior analysis, again, can be applied to most situations for even typically developing peers. And so yes, there are different areas in which we can ameliorate and decrease, and we call what's also replacement behavior. You can't just take away behavior. Kids are engaging in behaviors because there's something they're getting out of it. Or an adults engage in behavior because there's something we're getting out of it, whether it's great or not either. But how do we make that experience more meaningful and more functional and more rewarding and positive, right? So that's what we look at. Now remember, yes, kids can get diagnosed with autism, and yes, we can work on specific behaviors to decrease and replace them with meaningful behaviors. But at the end of the day, kids still grow, just like every typically developing kid. So new problems do come on. I mean,
true.
You've experienced that.
Yeah, and just like typical kids, especially in the teenage years when their hormones are changing and so forth. So I think we look at this as people with autism are amazing people, and and how do we support them, right? So because remember that it is a spectrum, and so you may have some people with autism who want to go to the birthday party, but the anxiety is so bad they can't go. Well, they want to go. Let's help them learn how to do that and how to interact in those environments. And then you may have some children who may have self-interest behavior. Maybe they hit their head or bite their finger, their hands and so forth. So, there are times when, and it's kind of like we're using this medical terminology, which is kind of sometimes hard to hear as a parent that, what do you mean my child, there's 3 deficits of autism or 3 core deficits, 3 symptoms of autism, kind of hearing it shaped that way is sometimes hard to hear, but just so parents know out there, I mean, that's how that's how we can get access to medical treatment for autism is by using some of that terminology. So I think it's the idea that, do symptoms go away? Well, they may not go away. We may just shape them in a manner that now allows Cindy to go to that birthday party. Or we change that symptom now, so when I'm scared or anxiety's up, I don't bite my hand, I chew on licorice or something. So it's just a way to really support that individual and through that family's journey with their clinicians and determining where they want their child to go and figuring that out along the way.
That's a great point. You mentioned insurance and coverage, and I'm sure that is a question, Kim, that you get all the time as far as cost for treatment in a program like this. So how do you address that?
Yeah, so what's amazing today as compared to where I started over a decade ago. So when I first started in this industry back in the early 2000s, insurance didn't cover any of this. So parents were paying out of pocket or relying on school districts to send them out for alternative placements. But today in the state of Ohio, insurance, Medicaid covers ABA therapy, applied behavioral analysis, and also commercial plans as well. So yeah, your insurance covers it. Now, will all insurance? It depends on what plan. So we walk you through that. And on top of that, we do have other services offered at Wolff and Phan Autism Center that doesn't fall under medical coverage, but can also be accessed through private pay as well. So one of my biggest passion is, again, prior to becoming board certified behavior analyst, I was really just into like medicine, and then when I was really introduced to autism, I realized, wow, so autism could really impact a child in 2 ways. One, if it's bad, then they can't engage in activities and events just like other kids their age. And then the great side of ABA, learning that now with ABA, these kids can, right? So one of the big things I got into was medical desensitization. And so that means, I work on sessions with these kids to teach them how to be able to sit and wait in the waiting room, go into the dentist's office, go into the doctor's office, doing EKGs. So because if kids need to have these things done, then they have to learn. But is it on the neurosurgeon or is it on the dentist to go figure this out? No, that's not their specialty. That's my specialty. So I've added that on, and it's going to be part of our practice. We do have. We've had some physicians who's been really supportive of what I'm working on, and so I've had other practices donate a dental chair, and so I'm looking for other things from other different physicians to kind of really offer, so we can continue to really create a room that looks like a medical office, so that we can work with the kids. Because that's the thing, you go to the dentist and maybe every 6 months for your but kids with autism need repeated practice, and so that's what I want to offer. And so that generally is private pay, but you can certainly find there's a lot of other funding sources. There's Zane. I'm on the board of that. So they help families who are in need to access therapy. There's, Ohio's great. There's the Autism Scholarship. There's the John Peterson. So there's a lot, but we will help as much as we can to inform and let you know what you can access.
So if there's parents that are watching this, listening right now, who may be a little concerned that, their children are showing signs, certain behaviors, are there telltale indicators that they should look for and then potentially come see you?
I think, you're a parent. I would say every parent has the parent instinct. You don't have, I would say, don't go read, the online and just go and look for things. Parent knows. A parent has that instinct. And so I would say when you have an instinct, if anything, not just autism, that something doesn't seem right, go to the physician. Whether it's eczema or just go, right? Just don't wait and don't look and don't second guess. I would say parent always has the right instinct. And what's the worst is that you're told you have eczema.
Right.
Right? So just go and know. And I say just always rely on a medical professional and communicate with them no matter what it is, not just autism. So
yeah, and I would say give good examples to your physician or whoever you're speaking with. Johnny just doesn't seem to be ever really engaged in the family. We're always bringing him in and then he's leaving, or he is really not speaking. And so really give thorough examples. Or we get into 20-minute tantrums like about 12 times a week. And so think about things, what you're seeing. And they have those really cool like child development little posters that are kind of easy to look at, but the idea, I think, really saying this, there's something going on here and here's what I'm seeing. And there's so much, especially early intervention, right? So there's a lot of early intervention teams families can access either through their school district or through their counties. But don't forget that some kids who are less impacted by autism may not start showing some of those signs and symptoms of autism well into early teen years. So so you kind of what's great is a lot of the awareness, right, that's around autism now is very helpful with that. But again, continuing to being able to walk in with some examples. This is kind of what we're seeing. I think is helpful, and that way you can relay it. Sometimes it's hard for parents to be honest about maybe how either bad a situation is going on in the home. They're your children. You love them, and you're trying to do your best as a parent. But I think sometimes as parents, you just say, hey, I need help, and I think I'm seeing something, and can we start getting into an early childhood development, screening, simple screening, and then depending on those results of that screening, you may want to move forward with something. But yeah, we don't want to forget about some, because there's a lot of kids who are less impacted on the spectrum who, again, usually are not diagnosed until preteens or teen years.
Yeah, and there's some of them, and a lot of the symptoms, sometimes, for example, one of the big things you may hear is kids with autism wanting things to be very specific in a certain way. So that's like rigidity, right? And that could look very different. So if you're on a spectrum where you're severely impacted, the slightest change in something, for example, if a puzzle piece didn't go in a certain way, and then that makes a 2-year-old really get upset, and they may engage with like a screeching sound, right? But for a high-functioning teen with autism, rigidity could be just simply, a birthday party they were looking forward to is now canceled, and they're upset beyond the norm. So a typical child may go to their room, or they may say, I'm really upset about that, or they pout a little bit. But perhaps for a teen with autism who are high functioning, they may get stuck on that topic before the event happened, even though the event was canceled, and then during and after, and they may engage in pacing back and forth some more. So that could create kind of like a difficult 48 hour for the parents. And then while it may seem manageable at 12 or 13 years old because they're just pacing now, but we want to, what a clinician like myself can offer is like, well, what does this look like when they're in their 20s and something didn't go well at work and someone changed their schedule? A meeting with the boss is now shifted. Do we want them to now pace and get upset? So how do we teach to cope, right? And regulate their emotions so as early as possible and being as upfront as possible is extremely helpful, because then that's my role. It's like, what will today look like perhaps in 10 years?
Right.
And that sometimes is hard for parents to see because we're just so focused on today, especially when you're a household with multiple children in varying ages. So we can at least help you, okay, this is the steps we want, strategy we want to work with today, so that in 10 years from now they're successful wherever they're at.
So for those that want to reach out to you, learn more about ABA, about your facility, what is the best way for them to do so?
What is the best way to reach out to me? Well, I can tell you my clinical manager cringes every time I answer the phone because I'm on the phone with her for like an hour. I want to know about you. I want to know how I can help you. I want to know what I can do. I want to be able to give you information about resources. And she's like, you can be overwhelming, Kim. So anyway, so our website, www.wpautismcenter.com. Again, we're really responsive. Our company policy is to be responsive within the next business day. And or call us, leave a message, email. Our email is also on the Wolff website. It's a Wolfpack, WOLFFPAC, at wpautismcenter.com, but it's all there. And I really do try really hard to get back. And that's part of having a private practice, is that it's manageable for me and for me to be available to families, because it isn't a journey just for the kids, it's a journey for the family. And as a family, you live in community. So I'm right in your backyard. I know what's going on. So I want to be there and support.
And families we need the behavior analyst clinical abilities, right? But we also need the other parts, that navigation part and understanding and how's this going to work and how are we going to fund this, and well, maybe my child does need some counseling. Can you help me find a counselor who understands autism? Because remember, a lot of people with autism have other co-occurring mental health. So I think that's a part of why these centers and centers in your backyard and close to your home, to get access to other practitioners your child may need, and that's the one thing about behavior analysts is, and then they can work with those practitioners too, back and forth. So really good care coordinating and things like that is definitely a part of what would happen with ABA therapy.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for making time. You are doing some amazing things helping families. This has been extremely educational, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to get great value from this. Any closing thoughts or messages you guys want to get out there before we cut?
I just want to say thank you to the community. I think the dream and the vision didn't really happen unless I have all the bits and pieces. So just from everyone who's been working with me and making, from the builder to the IT company to the marketing company, someone somehow has a direct relationship to autism, and so that has been really encouraging for me. Again, everyone needs to be reinforced, and so that has been wonderful for me to know and to be supported by the community, because it's such a big need.
Yeah, and the idea of more behavior analysts coming out of the 3 C's, right? These big cities and getting out to in people's communities. I just think that's so important, and then getting that community support to be able to do that is really important. It is, again, a young industry. This treatment is there, and so the idea of seeing it branch out, like your center's doing, into different areas, and where families aren't traveling an hour just to get to therapy anymore, is just amazing how far things have come.
Fantastic. Okay, another question I'm sure you guys get a lot is, how do you help these kids not only get back in connection with their peers, but back to school?
Yeah, that's a big question I get for parents. When they come to your center, what is your center? Is it a school? And so it's our funders we work with insurances. We're in the process of working with the scholarships that Ohio offers to students as well. So we'll be able to kind of navigate both. And what makes it unique, again, is, earlier I talked about, having a room so the kids can practice going to medical visits, but also the design of the space is also, it simulates what the age should be at, which is school age, right? So we have a classroom, we have a big gym space for kids to play, and then also a cafeteria, and we'll build in other programs. Because the whole point is, they're kids, so they've got to learn through kid activities too. So there's art involved, there's music involved, there's social time, circle time involved, right? And so that's all part of what we can do with ABA and teaching these kids our kids to transition. Transition is hard for adults, especially when there's a football game happening and we've got to go do something. So transition is also hard for kids. Yeah. And so we work on, it's really transition, but also building in appropriate activities. And so what is appropriate for a 6-year-old is school activities, right? Having access to peers. And so, so it's one-to-one, but our kids are also with other kids and they're learning together.
And I think that's, I think that is really confusing for parents, right? That, well, wait a minute, my school district did an evaluation and they say my child has a learning disability. But my clinical diagnostic told me that my son has autism, right? And so, and sometimes schools diagnose autism as well. So there's like this educational diagnosis over here, right? So we would be accessing services to meet the educational goals, right, around whatever that diagnosis is that child has received through that educational assessment. But then we also have these medical clinical diagnostics that are done too. So that's what's, I think, really cool about the way that, applied behavior analysis, that ABA treatment can bridge these two layers that are so important to kids, right? And most parents, you want your child to get the skills they need so they can be successful in the school environment. But sometimes to do that, you need to get them into smaller ratios, a smaller building, less sensory, and what's really great about ABA therapy is either there may be some intensive one-on-one work, but then there may be some group. We're allowed, we can have group ABA, and that would be a progression towards that school readiness and development for these kids to go back to school. So we want parents to. There needs to be a plan, right? Kim talks about discharge plans a lot. What is that discharge plan? And then how are we going to backward chain to make that happen? And so I think parents do need to know that, there is the autism scholarship that you can take at your center, and that, we do have insurance, right? So mirroring is not the right word, combining educational and some of this behavioral health together with that end goal that we'd love to get our child back into public school and around peers, and so driving that as part of the overall goals, and your facility's set up very well to do that. The school readiness skills, you've got a gym, you've got and things there that's just so important. But that's so confusing to us parents because, well, wait a minute, I have educational goals, I have behavioral health goals, but we need to think it's driving to the end goal, which is hopefully that your child can go back and go back with the skills to learn and progress, can continue in school.
Yeah, and every child's different. I mean, in over a decade I've worked with, that's why they call it the spectrum. So every child diagnosed with autism are very different in their own special way, and it's amazing. They have great skills. I mean, I had a student who, you told them your birthday, and she could tell you the day you were born that year. Oh. So it's really unique. But the thing is, like, the kids with autism, just like, I feel like even everyone else, like, how do we fit into this world, right? How do we fit into this group of friends? How do we fit into this group of, we want to be this astronaut. How do we get there? And that's what we're trying to do, is how do we get your child from point, because there's something that is preventing them from getting there, and we just want to get them there. Every child is trying to find their space in this big world.
Yeah, that's true.
And I pause that because I'm like, well, I'm an adult and I feel that way too.
Sure.
And we need guidance, right? And so, but kids with autism, now your guidance can include a behavior analyst who works with the family and the child. And so I wear multiple hats, and I've been asked a couple couple times if I was a magical unicorn. and so now I kind of envision myself, like that Disney magician character who wears his hat and so when I am asked to consult to a school, it's usually, okay, so the teacher's intentions are always, I want the student to succeed, but I need additional help, right? And so I would come in and say, okay, let me see what's happening, and let me help you utilize ABA strategies to really help the child succeed as a student. And when I so that's my hat in school, and when I take off my hat and I switch it out, in a medical facility, it's like, what does this child need to succeed in all locations? At a doctor's office, at the grocery store, can they wait? Can they, not touch all those candy by the checkout lane, And so can they go to the playground and learn how to engage with other kids versus maybe just, standing off to the side and not quite know how to engage with other kids. So that's looking at their overall quality of life. And so I would say that's kind of the big difference. So ABA is applied in all situations, but our center, we're not, we'll be working with insurance, but we'll also be working with other educational scholarships and services that's available, just because kids are kids, and kids have to learn, and life can be challenging for all kids. So we just want to get them over that hurdle and get to the next point.
That seems to be unique, at least from my research and experience, as far as it doesn't seem like other facilities necessarily take that approach. Would you say that's accurate?
I've been told that it's a very it's not what they've heard from the past, right? Again, the industry is really new. When ABA was first really being utilized, would you agree? It was mostly in psychiatric settings. So it was, again, that's different. Our kids don't, they don't have a psychiatric diagnosis. It's neurological. So there have been, like we talked about, stigmas before, but my approach specifically is there's a couple of things I want kids to, is it's got to be fun. Learning, therapy, any type of therapy. It's not just ABA. It could be speech. It could be OT and PT. It has to be fun. Kids have to be motivated to want to learn, to want to do something great. And it's just as adult, it has to be fun. No one wants to be around someone who isn't fun. And so perhaps, maybe, I don't know. So, but it has to be fun. And I think that's what it is. Like, kids have to learn through, it's got to be fun. But yes, there is a component of this. Got to be some school readiness skill. Because where does school take you? It takes you to jobs in the future. And part of those skill sets is being able to attend, follow multi-step instruction, and stay on task, right? These are basic skills, not just for school, it's for life. It's for jobs.
And communication, I think, too. I think that's a big deal. I mean, sometimes we see kids coming into their teen years and they have no functional way to communicate. So if you're a parent of a child who doesn't have a good, maybe they're not verbal, and if they don't have a functional way to communicate, because they can either do it off an iPad, they can do it off these little picture exchange systems, then you really need to engage with a behavior analyst, because a child, a teen, an adult, they need to be able to communicate. So, if that needs to be one of those, school readiness and all that is so important too, but don't forget that everybody should be able to communicate their wants and needs, and have somebody understand what their method of communication is. So that is a really big deal, and that's something Applied Behavior Analysis does really good work with supporting those individuals on and preparing them for school.
Right. So communication is it's huge. So we worked on expressive communication and receptive identification. So because that's all part of establishing language and establishing communication. So we will work heavily, and that's kind of what we do all day long. And we make sure that we are constantly talking. So kids can hear the words and language.
Right. I remember the first time my son had a device, what we called the talker, right? And he would click, and so they were pictures. So he learned that he couldn't read, but he knew the pictures. And I was given, I worked for a provider providing some ABA services, and I was taking a family around for a tour. And this is the first time he'd ever done that. He saw me come in the room, and he went to his talker, and he typed in, "This is my mom." And I was like, I'm with the family. I'm crying. So and he wanted to tell them, this is my mom, and it was just so wonderful. So don't forget that if you feel like your kids don't have a good way to communicate, or they're not progressing on that needs to be such an important goal.
Yes. And we certainly celebrate every milestone.
Yeah.
So we want to celebrate every step of the way. So I need to have a bell in my center when a kid hits a milestone, and we're just going to ring it all and not have the kids have a party.
Right.
But it's every milestone is a celebration, and that's because we work really hard to get there. So
that's what it's about.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. I'm so glad you brought that up. So as far as ABA treatment, is that only accessible through a facility like yours?
No, it's again, I touched upon this earlier a little bit, but to dive more into it, it's everywhere. So historically, when I first started, ABA wasn't a thing as far as having an ABA center or clinic. Now there's a lot of us, which is great to meet the needs of the families and the kids. But it's also utilized clinically in other settings, right? So we talked about being able to apply that in the home setting, in the school setting, and me wearing those multiple hats and what I can do with those hats.
And collaborate, right? I mean, I think the idea that when especially if the student is doing well in school, there's just some behavioral challenges. Well, we don't want to move them out of school.
Right.
We want to bring the services to them. So and the idea that sometimes our kids, our teachers do fantastic work and the paraprofessionals, but sometimes maybe there is more of a significant challenge going on, or there's the symptom of autism or whatever's going on, that we would need to bring a professional in, somebody who's a little more trained in behavior with autism to support them. And just like you would if your child had diabetes, right? And the only way to control the diabetes medically would be having a medical staff at the school. The school would probably provide some nursing, right? But if you have a child with severe diabetes, we have seen nurses that come to the school. So I think thinking of it in that way, that sure, our school environment, even in our homes as parents, we manage behavior, but there's sometimes when we need a little extra help and a little extra guidance, and we need that.
And a couple of things is also I've definitely been reached out by different scenarios, right? Perhaps a school district reached out to me and said, I think we need to send the student to your facility and we will cover the therapy services. My first answer is always, well, let me do an assessment first. I can't just give treatment without a full assessment, whether it's for a school or for a medical assessment. And then my goal is also, can I provide clinical services in that setting? And if I can't, then that's when we say we need a setting that's more therapeutic for that child. So always working where they're currently at, and let's transition them here. And there's certainly situations where I say, let's go ahead and start them right in the center, so that we don't, so that we can maximize the learning ability and then be able to transition back a lot quicker. So intensive hours can sometimes overwhelm schools or families. But I kind of say it's like working out. If you're trying to lose weight or get in shape, going to the gym once a week isn't going to yield a result. It will over if you stay consistent, like the 1 hour once a week, but it'll take longer, right? It could take 5 years to get to your goal. But if you had the ability to go to the gym daily and a consistent schedule and practice that, then you're gonna get to that weight or muscle goal a lot quicker. So that's the same way is that, it's just allowing us to give you those intensives so that at the end it is much more cost effective and be meaningful, so kids can access the natural environment a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And then I also get some families like, can they stay with you forever?
Yeah.
That all depends, and that all depends on the medical side of things, the education, it all depends. But every child I've ever worked with is on their own journey, and every family takes on a different perspective. I give my clinical feedback, and we work together. How do we get from point A to point B, and what are they most comfortable with? Because every family I've ever spoken to, it's about happiness and safety.
Yeah.
And then I add on, it's about happiness, safety, but how will your child continue to, yes, kids become adults, but when kids become adults, we all age.
Right.
And so can your child be successful after we're too old to care, right? So I add that piece on as a clinician is, let me make sure that I wear that hat for you down the line while you get to be present day mom and dad in your child's life and enjoy the moments as much as you can.
Yeah, and ABA can be delivered either comprehensive, more intensive, or it can be delivered in a focused ABA treatment. That's how we look at ABA today, and the idea that if the student is doing well in school and there's just a couple target behaviors that we worked on, right, that would be more focused ABA, right? We're working on some targeted things, and that could be an adult with autism in a developmental disability center, adult day services, and my son lives in his own home now with roommates, and you can bet that there are times when we need somebody to come in to target something. So think of applied behavior analysis as the complete package, where it can be comprehensive and intensive, but it can also be very focused, where Kim may come in, she's there for 2 months, they address what that target concern is, she's got the teacher trained, the paraprofessionals trained, she monitors for a while and she's out. And so that ebb and flow of needs is really important.
Yes.
If somebody asks you in general, how many hours of treatment is my child going to need, I would imagine it's a case-by-case situation.
Yeah, it could be, so some kids may only need 10 hours, so that's usually for kids who are fairly high functioning and they're working on social skills. So that means they'll come to the center towards the last couple of hours of the day after school, and then and they engage in peer groups. So it's turn taking, it's learning how to, I'm pausing because I'm like, oh, I need to work on this, but like how to lose without being upset, too upset, So, right, and companionship and talking about job interviews, and so we work on like if you're at 16, you're looking at about jobs. So do we talk about that? And so how do you manage stress, or how do you transition, or how do you manage how do you handle your supervisor when you don't understand some of the cues, the social cues? So that's for the older kids, and some kids do come for 30 to 40 hours and for comprehensive, and so that is, I always say, think about it. When you send your kid off to daycare, I have 3 kids who are in daycare, it's a 10-hour day because mommy has a job that I love. And so that's the day, it sounds like a long day. The word comprehensive seems scary, but it's a very typical schedule for, I would say, children as well. And so they come and they get to access, again, we've got gym spaces, we have pretend play, because that's how kids learn, is to play and how to interact with each other. So as far as the flow of the day, we're simulating where they're at, they should be at that age. So they are accessing a lot of fun, and perhaps sometimes they may not like it when we ask them that we tell them this game is over, it's time to clean up. But we're going to work through that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think too that, the assessments that behavior analysts use to really determine, what intensity level of treatment the child needs. And what's really cool about these assessments that you all do, a couple times a year is sometimes they're little boxes that are shaved in showing the progress of the child. And so when you may be a year into treatment, or maybe 2 years into treatment, you can see these boxes filling in at each one of these assessments. So a lot of times our psychologists or whoever's diagnosing our kids just say, hey, you need 40 hours of ABA, but what really comes and happens is the behavior analyst does this more in-depth assessment. They figure out where your skills are, where some of those challenges are, and then they address that, and that's when they determine that intensity. And like Kim's saying, it's just all over, because that's what's great as applied behavior analysis in a more clinical setting and treatment setting is very individualized. And so if a lot of kids getting the same hours of treatment, that doesn't sound right? That wouldn't be as individualized. So you want it to be individualized and tailored, right, to what your child needs. And that's what a lot of those assessments do. And what Kim's talking about is, and especially social skills. I'm glad you brought that up. These social skill environments, these kids can work on things that may be hard for them in a nice, safe environment. So that's important.
Yeah, I've already had parents like, well, you have summer camp, we have vocational. I'm like, we're trying to get there.
Yeah.
We're trying to get there because, right, these are kids. That's the thing is that in a clinic, it sounds like such a big term, like a hospital, but in an ABA center like ours, it's designed for the kids. That's what makes it different, right? Because sometimes for our kids in a natural setting, it's overwhelming, it's overstimulating, and they have different sensory needs. And so our learning rooms are much more conducive to learning. We make sure that we don't have a whole bunch of blinking lights around. We don't have too many visuals up, only just what they need to learn, so they're not too distracted either. And because then if we're spending a lot of time redirecting it, it could make them really upset. So that's the things that we look at, is how do we modify the environment in which they can learn and have minimal distractor. And then the other side of our center is like a simulation of a school. And so teaching them how to regulate and teaching them how to tolerate when it is other kids in the playground, when it's other kids running around, and perhaps now they have to learn how to wait. So that allows me, because kids are different in natural environments, and if we can't take every kid to a playground during the session. So this simulates and gives them the opportunities to practice, and so that when they are out at an actual playground with parents, it's easier on the kids, and it's also exciting for parents to see them grow and be able to interact with kids.
And the idea of discharge planning, right?
Yes.
Discharge begins at intake, right? And so, as they do these assessments, they do several times a year, and you're seeing progress. You're always reviewing what are our discharge goals, and how are we getting to where family you've determined you want your loved one to be, and so forth. So that's a big part of that intensity management of treatment and so forth as well.